Hello everyone, it's Ben King, new guy guitars for the Xanadudes. I joined this band right about the time of the zombie apocalypse, coronavirus lockdown, so I've only done a couple of shows with the band, but I hope everyone's doing well and staying safe during this difficult time. Thought I'd use some of my extra time just to answer some questions I was getting at the first couple of gigs regarding my sound and how I get it, and in some ways, it's Alex's sound because my goal is to sound like Rush. But I do have my own way of doing things and have to be comfortable with the sound myself. So I don't try to tone match Alex Lifeson per se, song for song, but I do try to get into the neighborhood of what Alex Lifeson is doing and then have my own touch on it so that I feel comfortable playing. But wanted to go over some of the tech just for a few minutes so anyone who's curious can see how I'm doing it on stage. So the key to a modern Alex Lifeson sound is 2 signal paths, because as I tell the band when they get frustrated in practice that I'm taking too long to set up, if we were playing just Rush through the 2112 album, for example, I could wheel in a Marshall combo and plug in a couple of pedals and I'd be fine to be able to get most of the sounds that Alex was getting in the early days. But Alex morphed over time and became more and more complex in terms of his sound. He switched guitars, he switched amps, he added the Piezo signal chain, which is I'll talk about in a moment, to get a more and more complex sound. So to play the music of, say, an album like Power Windows, you just can't wheel in that Marshall combo and a couple of pedals. So I end up being frustrated sometimes because there's many things that can go wrong in my small little rig, and they often do. So anyway, I wanted to just talk about those 2 signal paths. And by the way, there are plenty of rig rundown videos for Alex Lifeson's actual rig, and I recommend that if you're curious about this, you check his out. He has a little more equipment than I do, but anyway, the signals chains that Alex Lifeson typically ran later part of his career are a traditional signal chain with clean and dirty sounds, but he would also layer on top of that sounds from a Piezo transducer pickup, which is built into this. This is a signature model Les Paul guitar that Alex Lifeson model, and it actually has, if you note, 2 different inputs on the guitar. Maybe I'll zoom in on that a little bit as I'm going through this. But the one of those outputs is just a traditional guitar output for the magnetic pickups, and the second one is a Piezo pickup for the transducer. It's built into the bridge, so you get more of an acoustic sound out of that particular output. So I have to have really different treatment for each of those 2 outputs because the Piezo won't sound good going to an amp. It has to go through a different set of effects, and then it generally goes straight out to the PA, or if I'm recording, to my DAW. So it requires a separate treatment. Now, my entire rig has been designed around figuring out how to blend those 2 signal paths live and change it constantly throughout the course of a set, because sometimes you only want a little bit of this, you want the Piezo, and sometimes you want to have it dominate. Sometimes it's purely an acoustic sound, like the intro to Closer to the Heart or something along those lines. So it's got to be constantly changing the levels and the blending, and it's too much to ask the sound guy to constantly do that from the board. You can't count on it. So my rig is designed to really take the complex and make it simple. What I'm trying to do in any show is work from the show backwards. What do I want to do with this show? I don't want to worry about a lot of pedal dancing. I do enough of it already, but really the sound I'm going for comes down to a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is 5 separate presets for each song, depending. Some songs don't need that many, but a maximum of 5 different presets that I can step on as I go through the song to change those sounds. And each time I step on one of those numbers, a lot of things are happening, many things. And the best example I would have ready and teed up to show you would be the song Prime Mover. So In the song Prime Mover, it starts out with a hard intro, traditional magnetic pickup sound, but then it goes to this washy, blended sort of piezo and clean sound for the opening verse. So here's an example of that. This is the intro to Prime Mover. Okay, so after that, and then we kick into okay, so very different sounds. Later on, you get to the bridge, you need a different blend. So now you're blending a clean sound similar to the same sound that I had for the verses, but there are actually different effects on that section than there are on the verse section. So the rig is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for me in the show, but each time I step on one of those numbers, dramatically different things are happening. So what is happening? Let's talk about that quickly. There are channels of the amplifier that have to change to go from a clean and to a dirty sound, and there are in sort of all phases in between. There are channels of my effects, my multi-effects unit, that change settings for each effect, whether it be delay, reverb, chorus. And at the same time, there's also the direction and routing of the signal itself. So what if I'm playing a purely acoustic sound? I need just the piezo pickup to route through, and it's not going to the amp, it's going to go to the PA through a separate signal chain. So to do that, all that routing is kind of complicated, and it's the biggest challenge of this rig. But a great handy device that I have been using recently is something by Sound Sculpture called the Switchblade 8F. It allows 8 separate inputs into the device, and it's basically like Grand Central Station. It also has 8 separate outputs, and through a magic of computer programming, I can create any signal chain out of that I want that'll work. And that has been a godsend because I can do a lot of things that I wouldn't be able to do with a normal wiring, which, for example, if I want to play purely through the piezo pickup, but I want to use the effects that I'm using for my amp and my magnetic chain, I can actually cross over and borrow the effects on my piezo. I have the flexibility through this computer program, which I'll also show you, to route those in many different ways. Those outputs can be routed to pretty much anywhere in my rig. I can steal an effect from one place and use it in a different sound. So it gives me a lot of flexibility to program my sound. Each song has 5 different presets that could be any configurations of my rig based on how I route that particular preset. So that is the essence of it. Just quickly going over what's actually creating those sounds. First of all, I use an archaic device that you can find for pretty good prices on eBay these days called the TC Electronic G system. It has been around for a long time. It's still up for sale on TC Electronics page, and it's just a great device. It's very well built, very well thought out, and it has excellent effects. So that's the core of my effects unit setup in terms of getting my delays and reverbs and choruses and that kind of thing. And it's a great routing device itself. So it does play a part in the routing. Also allows me to turn on effects on and off from my amp through the magic of MIDI. So that's the hub of the unit, and I also have foot pedals that I'll be working on stage, including a wah and a volume pedal. And I have something called the tone bone, which again is sort of a routing tool. I can use that to turn on and off the piezo chain or the magnetic chain independently. There are songs like Force 10, for example, where it'll start out with a little bit of piezo, and then all I want to do is just turn the piezo off, but have the rest of the sound there. The tone bone allows me to do that. In terms of on the rig, I have 2 shelves of effects that would be on any normal pedal board. They're not special effects, they're just for the pedal board effects, and I put them on a rack because I don't want to be controlling them again individually on stage. I want to worry about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the effects on these shelves all go into that Switchblade and can be utilized that way. And so the bottom shelf here is a shelf for my primarily magnetic effects and the Switchblade itself. And then the top shelf is primarily the effects that are used for the piezo. Okay, I'm cutting this in real quick because in a rig rundown, somehow I forgot to mention my guitar amp, which is really bad. So my amp is a Hughes & Kettner Grandmeister 40 Deluxe, and the best part about it for purposes of this rig is it's MIDI controllable. So I can control any parameter on the amp at a touch of a button of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the TC Electronic G system. It'll change all the EQ settings, it'll change the channels, it'll change the amount of drive, and pretty much anything except the master volume. Just a few more examples of sounds from the shows that we might be doing in the future, just to give you a sense of the way these different blendings can go. And actually what I'll do is as I play the sound, I'll show you the routing through the Switchblade, and you can kind of see what effects are in that particular sound. All right, starting with the ultra simple, let's go with Tom Sawyer. So that starts out with your basic hard rock guitar sound, but with a little bit of chorus, because Alex Lifeson liked that chorus later in his career. And the intro would start out with this chord going. Okay, so Tom Sawyer is one of those songs that I only use 2 sounds for. You don't have much going on there. Basically, it's that intro sound and then this sound for the solo. And so on. So Tom Sawyer is very simple. Prime Mover was an example of something that's a little more complicated, and the camera eye is something that's a little more complicated. Let's take a quick look at that. So the intro for camera eye is kind of a muted crunch type of sound, not too heavy, and just kicks in with this one note. While the keyboards and all that are going on, and Alex is doing things like little subtle touches. Not a lot of heavy sound there, but later on, the song kicks into something heavier like this. So that's the basic idea there. And then even later on, you have, again, the piezo coming back into it to do this. Okay, and also during the opening verse, or the 2 verses. And also. All right, and one example of what's happening there, and that sound, that's what's coming out of the magnetic pickups right there. And then this is what's coming out of the Piezo pickups. All right, put them together. So you get a very lush sound, and at a gig, I'm sending my signal out basically 2 cables. So the sound man has the ability to pan those 2 different sounds and blend them together so they work well for the particular song. All right, this video is running long, so I just wanted to thank everybody for being fans of the band and paying attention to us during this time. We really wish we were out playing, but hopefully we'll get back to that soon. Everybody stay safe and take care.